Jake from Tiny Nest here. I'm about to do some really basic checks and maintenance on our propane appliances. The two of which we have are a water heater and the furnace. And I'm just gonna do this in the order that's most convenient for me and take you on a little ride around the outside of the house and then back in. And I'm gonna apply a couple things I picked up from the furnace's documentation to the water heater, because the water heater's documentation has practically nothing about maintenance specific to this unit. And well, actually, I think we're due for a video specifically on this unit and our experiences with it overall. So we'll make that soon. But for now, I'm gonna get started on this, and I've got a bit of a plan of how I'm gonna approach it. Something I'll quickly point out on the door here is this little modification I've made. It's pretty DIY. I could have made it nicer, but it works right now. It's just a piece of duct tape and a little scrap of, it's actually the same stuff we have on our awning. It's like a UV resistant plastic. And I just put it here to shed water away, but allowing air to still freely pass in front of this tube. So there's this tiny tube, and you'll see it when I open it up. But it goes into this diaphragm, and it basically, if it's blocked, it will prevent the unit from firing. And I believe it's a safety mechanism. So if something falls in front of the unit and this can't suck in any air, then it won't fire, because that would be dangerous. If the exhaust can't escape, it can overheat and all the rest of it. So what we found was happening is because of the way we're sort of exposed here, and this must be an issue with RVs. I've actually seen another video on YouTube about someone dealing with this exact same issue. When this is exposed to the elements, it's such a small diameter that rain can actually hit it and build up, and just a tiny bit of water in the tip of it can prevent, will be detected as a blockage and prevent the thing from firing. So anyway, that's what this is all about. Now I'm gonna get it opened up. All right, now we're inside, and I'm not gonna get into what all this stuff is, but over here is, obviously the heat exchanger. The water comes through, the flame occurs inside there and heats this whole copper contraption up. So with the burner being in there, and then the exhaust fumes coming through and exiting here through a little fan that's back in there, I just want to blow some compressed air in there, sort of try to blow out any debris that might be in the path of that exhaust and everything. But I also want to be careful, like I've got this turned up pretty high, and I don't want to blow so hard to sort of counter spin that fan, because you can actually kind of damage fan bearings doing that kind of thing. So I'm keeping that in mind, but just doing a general kind of spray out here. So that's pretty much all I can physically do. Because of the way this is built, there isn't really anything that's, as an owner, that's easy to just open up to get in and clean or check or anything. It's all sort of factory assembled and tightened and everything, and you can see how kind of complicated it is, being an on-demand unit. But the one thing I do want to do while the door is off, and it's designed for this, is with this hole that I was spraying into, I can look in there while the flame is running and see what the flame looks like. So you're supposed to see an even blue flame. There's a whole bunch of tiny perforations where the gas comes out, and there's all these tiny little sort of little nubblies of blue flame, and that's the way it's supposed to look. If there's yellow flame or it's kind of erratic, it could mean that there's an obstruction or the gas isn't flowing correctly, basically. So I'm going to run some hot water inside so that this fires up, and have a look in and just visually confirm that it's that the flame is burning the way that it's intended to. All right, it's running right now, and I'm just gonna stick my head in here and have a look. And it looks real good. I'm gonna attempt to get the camera into place here. And I gotta do a bunch of stuff with changing the focus and whatnot. But that's not too bad. I think you can see in there. Now I can see a tiny bit of yellow sort of puffs there. but I remember seeing that right from day one. And I can see that all the blue flames are nice and even at the bottom there. All right, I'm satisfied with my visual check there. All the even blue flame at the bottom. And like I pointed out, there's those tiny puffs of orange or yellow, but also, like I said, we've seen that since the very first time we ran it. And it's the same thing with our furnace. It's, you know, the majority of the gas where it's coming out of the burner is nice and blue and steady. And then of course there's, you know, it gets a bit turbulent as the, you know, you look further away from the actual point of combustion. And so as far as I understand and have experienced, that's normal. If you have any feedback on that, there's anything more I should be looking for, definitely let us know. Now, our unit is pretty clean and free from almost any wear and tear compared to a lot of units that I've seen online, except for what I've noticed here, which is some surface corrosion on this copper fitting. You can see the green here, and it's threaded into this plastic portion. This is all water line here. So I suspect that there is a tiny bit of weeping coming through the threads here and getting onto this. Either that or it's maybe condensation, but it seems very specific to this fitting. And there's another one over right here, you probably can't see as well, but it's the same fitting, and it's going into the other side of this plastic component, which is, you know, where the water flows to trigger the burner, and it's completely fresh looking. So I suspect there's a tiny bit of leakage here. There's no water pooled underneath, and there's no real corrosion on the bottom of the can here either. So it's probably very minimal, but it's something that I'm going to keep an eye on and possibly have to get like an actual service technician to replace this. I'd like to do it myself. I might be able to. It's kind of one of those things where, you know, I don't know. I just don't know if I want to get in here and start messing with stuff. I mean, it's just a water line, so we'll see. But this also appears to have a bit of corrosion. It's a fitting for the gas. I believe you can unthread this and put on some kind of fitting to check the gas pressure to make sure that it's, you know, if you're having trouble with it, you can check to make sure that there's the correct gas pressure at the burner. So I don't know if maybe a bit of condensation or something from inside the line is getting through. Again, if you have any experience with this kind of thing, give us some feedback in the comments, and I'll just be keeping an eye on this. So that's pretty much it. There's one other thing that I wanted to ask you guys about. This video is just as much me showing what I'm up to as it is to ask you guys for your input. I've seen a lot of reference to flushing out on-demand water heaters, but mostly in reference to residential units. So I don't know if there's a difference. It just doesn't seem like there should be. It's pretty much the same type of apparatus. And it's flushing it out to get rid of scale and like buildup of mineral deposits. And we do have hard water. You know, you might have seen in our other videos, there's a lot of iron and stuff in it, but we also have a softening system. And when I've seen the examples of the scale, that white, I think it's mostly calcium, that blocks up the, so horses are running by. It blocks up the aerators at the tips of your faucets, and you have to unscrew it, and there's all these chunks of white, and you've got to clean that out, and it's a pain. That's sort of an indication that you need to flush your system, but we haven't had that issue, and I don't know if it's because, and yeah, I don't know if our softening system is dealing with that to the point where we don't really need to flush this in particular. And I also don't know if there's if there is a buildup, if it's a risk to the unit, or if it just constantly is, chipping off and ending up in those screens in the aerators, and that's really the only, like that end result is the only problem to worry about, or if you're really in danger of kind of having the internals of your on-demand heater get messed up. So let us know if you have any experience with this. What I've seen that you should do is flush the unit for several tens of minutes with a little external pump and a bunch of vinegar. So we could easily do that, and we might just do it to be safe. But yeah, it's kind of weird because we haven't had the issue that seems to be the main reason for doing that flushing. Around the corner of the house, we've got the intake and exhaust ports for the furnace. Obviously, we use the water heater year round, but the furnace we haven't fired in many months, so it's a good idea to have a pretty close look at this. Now, the documentation for the furnace, like I said, has some maintenance stuff in it. Particularly, they really hammer home to make sure there's no soot and also no obstructions blocking these. Again, like if you can't expel the exhaust here, it's going to overheat inside and it can cause a real safety hazard. I did remove one small wasp nest that was just a few inches inside here. And some people might say, oh, you should put like a finer mesh on here so that bugs can't get in. But it says in the documentation, and with good reason, it says very explicitly to not do that, because when you have a finer mesh, that can trap small debris. So for example, for the intake, if it's windy and there's a bunch of pollen or whatever, it can get trapped against that screen and block it, or stuff can get sucked through and get stuck on the back side of the exhaust. So you can get a blockage. Basically, under no circumstances do you want a blockage here. So right off the bat, just a visual inspection, I don't see any soot, which is an indication that there's a problem with the combustion mixture, or maybe gas is not combusting and you're getting buildup here, which could ignite or whatever. There's lots of reasons why soot is an indication of an issue. So there's none of that, which is good. And I'll show you a close-up in here, just what the tubes look like. And I brought out my vacuum already that I can pull all the way out from the house. We'll make a little video on that soon as well. And my compressed air. And I'm basically just gonna blow in both directions and just try to kick free any tiny debris that might have gotten in there. I'm confident that the intake and exhaust is clear of debris, it's clean, it's in good shape. So I've come inside where I've actually kind of already got myself into trouble here when I started poking around with this. So I'll show you what I mean just as soon as I take off this furnace cover. All right, so you can see that this is kind of taken apart, and it's because I went in here poking around, was gonna sort of do a bit of cleaning and check it out before shooting any video. And I followed the instructions in the documentation, which suggested to inspect the burner and make sure it's clean and everything. And so I unscrewed this cover plate and pulled it out, and the gasket here, which is sort of a fibrous material, just immediately ripped. Like before I had a chance to even get this out, it was coming apart. So I obviously didn't feel comfortable putting it back together like that, and I had to wait for a new gasket, which has arrived, so I can hopefully do this. Sorry, I'm bumping the camera here. But this is what it looks like with the burner. This huge tube goes in, and this little ring guides it onto the orifice where the actual gas comes out. So the gas is shot into the tube, and it flows out of all these tiny little slots. And this is the electrode where the spark occurs. And at the front is where it clips on, where it gets the power to do the spark. And it lights it and it burns all along here. So as you can see, there is a little bit of darkness here. I wouldn't call this soot. It's not like coming off on me or anything. But it does say in the manual that you can just give it a gentle cleaning with some steel wool, just to sort of freshen it up. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And then also, while I had this out, I inspected inside here and inspected the whole sort of burner chamber in general, because you don't want any leakage, and this is why the gasket is so important, because then you can get carbon monoxide coming out of there. You want that all to get expelled out the exhaust, out the back. So I'm gonna have to clean up this gasket. That's it's all coming apart here, so I'll scrape that off on both sides to make sure that the new gasket gets a good seal. I'll scrape this down. I'll also use my compressed air and vacuum just to blow out around here in case there's any dust or anything. And then I'll put this back in. So that's sort of the main cleaning procedure I'm gonna do here. And I guess I'll just let the camera roll while I'm doing that. All right, I've really tried to, spray it out all over, vacuum in there, get a good look into different places with the flashlight. Everything looks good. There wasn't any big bits of anything, just a bit of dust and a couple of dog hairs and that kind of thing. So I'm feeling pretty good about the just general condition of its cleanliness. This darkening on the burner didn't really come off, which if anything just makes me more confident that it's not a deposit from some kind of improper burning. Again, the manual really repeats multiple times about watching out for soot, and this is definitely not, not what they're talking about. So I feel pretty good about that. I decided to take off the electrode as well and clean off that little gasket, given how crispy and sort of questionable condition the main gasket was in. It comes, I was reaching over here. This guy comes with the internal gasket as well. So, the electrode gasket. So I'm just gonna replace that while I'm at it. So that's that. And I'll give you a quick look inside here in case you're curious what it looks like. And one other thing I'm thinking about doing is that these holes for the screws that hold this plate in have like these really bad burrs sticking out of there, because it's, I think the screws were just twisted straight in and it sort of marred the metal there. And so that's gonna kind of dig into the new gasket. So I'm gonna see, I'm not gonna go crazy because I don't wanna compromise the how tight the holes will hold the screws, but I'm gonna see about minimizing how sharp they are here with a file. So I'm ready to put this all back together. I think what I'll do is put this in first, and once I've got it tightened down, I can put that electrode thing on, and it'll just be easier to do it in that order. So I'm going to carefully get this open. I'm gonna grab some scissors actually. Okay, I think I got it lined up here. Something I don't like about this design is that, that long tube there, there's that little ring I mentioned earlier that fits over where the gas actually comes out. That has to slide over it, and it's kind of, doesn't really give me a lot of confidence that it's so far down there. I can't see that it's actually slipped on, but I can tell the way that it's sitting in here that it's in the right position, but it would just be nice to have that visual confirmation that it's in the right spot. Now, there's no information about torque values or anything like that for this. So I'm gonna do like a crisscross pattern and just kind of gingerly get it more and more snug. It's just sort of a personal confidence thing in this case, I think. The last thing I want to do is strip it. So I've got it to a point where it feels pretty tight. And what I'll just have to do is, after running it a couple times, I'll come back and just check to make sure that the heat and the expansion contraction hasn't loosened anything. But I feel pretty good about that, so I'm just going to put the electrode in now. So I noted that the electrode, which has an offset sort of along this axis, was to the right, so I made sure to put it back in the right orientation. And there's kind of this funny offset in height, like this screw is lower this way than this one, and even the gasket had the holes punched that way, so I made sure to sort of flip it and turn it until it lined up properly. And actually, when I was pulling the old one off, it was quite clear that the person who installed it just like made their own hole to deal with the offset and didn't have it lined up right. So this actually feels more proper than the original factory job that was done. And again, now these threads are even finer, so I want to be real careful here not to over tighten this. Definitely not use a power tool like an impact or anything crazy like that for something like this. Just feel that nice snugness. All right, that is good. And then I'm just gonna get this on here. And I think we're gold. I had shut off the power. I gotta reach in through the cabinet door here to get at where the power switch is. So I'll turn that on and we'll do a test fire. And then, as I talked about earlier, I'm gonna look through the little window here to inspect the flame to make sure that it looks even and blue. All right, it's running. Hopefully you can hear me over the blower motor. I tried to get some footage inside the little window. It's really hard with the camera compared to just looking in there. And it's the same story where there's a nice hard blue flame down at the source of the gas through all those little slots. There's a bit of turbulence and like the occasional flicker of a redder type of flame, but this is, again, what we've seen since it was brand new. So it's good that we got familiar with it early on so that we can compare it over time to see if anything is changing and may indicate some kind of wear and tear or buildup of residue or whatever. But what I'm seeing right now is inspiring confidence, so I'm feeling good about the state of it right now. I'm going to shut it off because it's getting pretty hot right now. And as usual, the flame goes out. The blower continues to run for a while to blow off excess heat. And then it shuts off automatically. And now there's one more thing that I want to check, first on the furnace and then on the water heater, which is the propane connection. I'm going to be using the soapy water, spray it on the threads and look for bubbles technique. We've already done this. We showed it in the installation video, I think particularly of the furnace. So not going to explain it in a ton of detail. I'm just going to do it and just make sure that, again, the expansion contraction of the heat and any other factor that might have caused any shifting in the tightened connection. Just gonna make sure that it's still a sound and sealed connection. It'll be really hard to show, but I'll try. I'm feeling pretty confident with what I'm seeing here. I don't see any bubbling at all. We did see some bubbling in our initial installation, and again, that's in a previous video. So I know what to look for, and I'm not seeing it. So I'm feeling pretty good about the state of the propane seal here. All right, I've checked the propane fitting on the water heater as well with the soapy water test, and it's looking good. So I'm feeling pretty confident about everything to do with the water heater and the furnace for the winter season coming up here. Except for maybe flushing the water heater, like I mentioned earlier. So again, if you have anything to say about that, any comments or experience or expertise you'd like to share, or any criticisms, go ahead and leave it in the comments below.